The morning sun cast long shadows across the marble floors of Eldoria Palace as Princess Isabella adjusted her emerald silk dress for the third time. The annual Royal Heritage celebration was set to begin in just 2 hours, and the anxiety in the air was almost tangible. She watched from her chamber window as dozens of black cars lined the circular driveway, each carrying dignitaries, foreign royals, and members of parliament who had traveled from across the continent for this prestigious event. Isabella's fingers trembled slightly as she fastened her grandmother's pearl necklace around her neck. At 28, she had attended countless royal functions, but today felt different. Today, her 8-year-old son Marcus would be officially introduced to the extended royal family as the future heir to the throne. The weight of expectation pressed down on her shoulders like a heavy cloak. Marcus burst through the connecting door between their chambers, his usually perfect blonde hair slightly disheveled, and his royal blue uniform jacket askew. His green eyes sparkled with excitement and nervous energy as he practically bounced on his toes. "Mother, when will I meet great-uncle Theodore's son?" Marcus asked, tugging at his collar. "James said he's coming today, and he's only 2 years older than me. Do you think we'll be friends?" Isabella's smile faltered for just a moment. Theodore's son, William, had been living abroad with his mother since his parents' bitter divorce 5 years ago. The family rarely spoke of the scandal that had rocked the palace when Theodore's wife, Lady Catherine, had publicly accused him of having multiple affairs and attempting to manipulate the line of succession. The divorce had been messy, public, and deeply embarrassing for the crown. "I'm sure you'll get along wonderfully, darling," Isabella replied, kneeling down to straighten Marcus's jacket. "But remember what we discussed about proper behavior during formal events. You represent not just our family, but the entire kingdom." Marcus nodded solemnly, though his excitement was barely contained. He had grown up in the palace, surrounded by tutors, guards, and staff who treated him with the utmost respect and deference. The idea of meeting another child who understood the unique pressures of royal life filled him with anticipation. Down in the palace's security office, Captain James Morrison reviewed the guest list one final time. At 45, Morrison had been head of royal security for over a decade, and he had learned to trust his instincts when something felt off. Today, those instincts were practically screaming at him. The guest list included several names that made him uncomfortable. Theodore's ex-wife Catherine had been granted permission to attend with their son William, despite the restraining order that had been quietly lifted just for this event. Morrison had advised against it, but the king had insisted that family unity must be maintained for public appearances. Morrison's assistant, Lieutenant Sarah Chon, approached his desk with a concerned expression. "Captain, we've received some troubling intelligence about Lady Catherine's current mental state. Her personal physician contacted us yesterday expressing concerns about recent changes in her medication and behavior." Morrison's jaw tightened. "What kind of concerns?" "Paranoid delusions, sir. She's been telling people that Marcus isn't the rightful heir, that there are documents proving her son William should inherit the throne instead. Her doctor says she's become increasingly agitated about the succession, especially since the announcement of today's ceremony." The captain stood up and began pacing. In his experience, family disputes within royal circles were often the most dangerous threats to security. Unlike external threats, internal family members had access, knowledge of palace layout, and often carried emotional motivations that made them unpredictable. "Double the security detail around Prince Marcus," Morrison ordered. "And I want someone keeping eyes on Lady Catherine and her son at all times. If she so much as looks at Marcus the wrong way, I want to know about it immediately." Meanwhile, in the palace's east wing, Lady Catherine sat in the guest quarters she had been assigned, staring at her reflection in the ornate mirror. At 36, she was still strikingly beautiful, with dark auburn hair and piercing blue eyes. But the years since her divorce had taken their toll. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, and her once confident posture had been replaced by a nervous energy that made her constantly fidget with her jewelry. Her son William sat nearby, reading a book about palace history. At 10 years old, he was tall for his age, with his father's dark hair and his mother's intense blue eyes. Unlike Marcus's innocent excitement about meeting family, William had been thoroughly briefed by his mother about what she called the truth about his position in the royal hierarchy. "Remember what I told you, William," Catherine said, turning from the mirror to face her son. "Marcus may be younger, but the adults will all pay attention to him because they think he's more important. But you and I know the real truth, don't we?" William nodded, though confusion flickered in his young eyes. His mother had spent years telling him conflicting stories about his place in the family, filling his head with claims about secret documents and hidden truths that would someday prove his rightful claim to the throne. The constant pressure and mixed messages had left the boy uncertain about almost everything except his desire to please his mother. "When I give you the signal today," Catherine continued, her voice taking on an urgent tone, "I need you to do exactly what we practiced. Go to Marcus, take his hand like you're just being friendly, and lead him to where I'll be standing near the old portrait gallery. Can you do that for Mother?" William shifted uncomfortably in his chair. They had practiced this scenario dozens of times during their stay in the guest quarters, but he still didn't understand why it was necessary. "But, Mother, won't the guards stop me? And why can't we just ask Marcus to come with us?" Catherine's expression hardened. "Because the guards work for people who want to keep the truth hidden, William. They don't want you to have what's rightfully yours. This is the only way to get Marcus alone, so I can explain to him how we're all family and should support each other." The explanation didn't make much sense to William, but he had learned not to question his mother too deeply when she got that particular look in her eyes. Instead, he nodded again and returned to his book, trying to push down the growing anxiety in his stomach. Back in the main palace, final preparations were underway for the ceremony. The grand ballroom had been transformed into a glittering showcase of royal tradition, with crystal chandeliers casting rainbow patterns across the polished floors and massive floral arrangements filling the air with the scent of roses and jasmine. King Edward, Marcus's grandfather, stood reviewing his speech with his private secretary. At 72, the king still cut an impressive figure in his formal military dress uniform, though those closest to him could see the signs of weariness that came with decades of public service and family scandals. "Your Majesty," his secretary ventured carefully, "perhaps we should consider keeping today's ceremony brief, given the circumstances." The king's steel-gray eyes flashed with irritation. "Absolutely not. This family has weathered storms before, and we will not allow past difficulties to diminish Marcus's moment. He deserves to be celebrated and welcomed properly into his future role." Despite his confident words, the king couldn't shake his own concerns about Catherine's presence at the event. He had hoped that time and distance would have helped her find peace after the divorce, but recent reports suggested she had only become more unstable and fixated on what she perceived as injustices against her son. In the palace kitchen, dozens of staff members worked frantically to prepare the elaborate lunch that would follow the ceremony. Head chef Marie Dubois had been awake since 4 in the morning, supervising the preparation of dishes that needed to be perfect for the international guests and media representatives who would be analyzing every detail of the event. "Chef Dubois," called her assistant, "the security team needs to inspect all the serving dishes before we bring them to the dining room. Something about additional precautions for today's event." Marie frowned but nodded. In all her years at the palace, she had never seen the security team quite so on edge. Usually, their protocols were thorough but routine. Today felt different, charged with intention that made everyone jumpy. As the morning progressed, guests began arriving in earnest. Foreign dignitaries, distant cousins, government officials, and carefully selected members of the press were all escorted to their designated areas within the palace. The sound of cars, conversations, and clicking cameras created a buzz of activity that seemed to energize the very walls of the ancient building. Marcus had been moved to a private room where he would wait until it was time for his formal introduction. His tutor, Miss Eleanor Hartwell, sat with him, going over the protocol one final time while trying to keep him calm and focused. "Remember, Your Highness," Miss Hartwell said in her gentle but firm voice, "when your name is announced, you will walk slowly to the center of the ballroom. Your grandfather will place his hand on your shoulder, and you will bow to the assembled guests. Then, you may take your seat at the royal table." Marcus practiced the bow several times, his young face serious with concentration. Despite his excitement about meeting other children, he understood the importance of the day and wanted desperately to make his family proud. "Miss Hartwell," Marcus said during a break in their practice, "do you think the other children will understand what it's like? Living in the palace, I mean. Sometimes I feel like I'm different from everyone else." The tutor's heart went out to the young prince. Despite all his privileges, Marcus often seemed lonely, surrounded by adults who were either working for his family or treating him with the formal respect due to his future position. The chance to connect with another child from a similar background could be exactly what he needed. "I think young William will understand you very well, Your Highness. You both carry unique responsibilities, and that can create a special kind of friendship." What Miss Hartwell didn't know was that William had been raised with a very different understanding of those responsibilities, and that his mother had spent years nurturing resentments and delusions that were about to explode into the open. As noon approached, the guests were seated and the ceremony was about to begin. The king took his position at the front of the ballroom, with Isabella and other senior family members arranged beside him in order of precedence. The carefully choreographed event was designed to project stability, tradition, and unity. Captain Morrison positioned his security team strategically throughout the ballroom, with particular attention paid to the areas where Lady Catherine and William were seated. He had a clear view of the entire room from his position near the main entrance, and he kept one eye constantly on Catherine, noting her increasingly agitated movements and the way she kept whispering urgently to her son. The moment that would change everything was just minutes away, though none of the assembled guests could have imagined how quickly their carefully ordered world was about to descend into chaos. In that grand ballroom, filled with centuries of tradition and protocol, family secrets and hidden resentments were about to collide with devastating consequences. As the ceremony began, Marcus felt his heart racing with excitement and nerves, completely unaware that his cousin William was sitting just rows away, struggling with his own conflicted emotions about the plan his mother had drilled into him. Neither boy could have predicted that their first meeting would become the center of a scandal that would rock the very foundations of the monarchy. Part 2 of the ceremony began with the traditional fanfare, as the palace orchestra filled the grand ballroom with the stirring notes of the royal anthem. Marcus stood backstage with Miss Hartwell, his small hands clasped behind his back as he had been taught, trying to control his breathing while the sound of hundreds of voices joining in the anthem echoed through the palace. King Edward's voice rang out clear and strong as he began his speech, welcoming the distinguished guests and explaining the significance of formally introducing Marcus to the extended royal family and the international community. The cameras flashed constantly, capturing every moment for the historical record and for the press releases that would be distributed worldwide within hours. "Today, we gather not just as representatives of our various nations and institutions," the king declared, "but as a family united in our commitment to service, tradition, and the future of our monarchy. It is my great honor to introduce you to Prince Marcus Edward Alexander, who will someday carry forward the legacy that has been entrusted to our family for over 8 centuries." In the audience, Lady Catherine's grip tightened on her son William's hand until he winced. Her breathing had become shallow and rapid, and she kept glancing toward the exits as if calculating distances and timing. The medication changes her doctor had been concerned about were clearly affecting her judgment, and the stress of being in the palace surrounded by family members she blamed for her exile was pushing her toward a breaking point. "Remember what we discussed," she whispered to William, her voice barely audible but intense with urgency. "As soon as Marcus comes out, you need to be ready. This is our only chance to set things right." William nodded reluctantly, his stomach churning with anxiety. He loved his mother and wanted to make her happy, but something about this plan felt wrong. The palace guards looked so serious and alert, and he couldn't understand why his mother thought it was necessary to approach Marcus in secret rather than simply talking to him openly. From his position near the entrance, Captain Morrison noticed Catherine's agitation and spoke quietly into his radio. "All units, be advised that Subject Catherine is showing signs of increasing stress. Maintain positions and be prepared for immediate response. Lieutenant Chun, positioned closer to the royal family section, acknowledged the message and adjusted her position slightly to have a clearer view of both Catherine and the area where Marcus would be standing during his introduction. The king's speech continued, recounting the history of the monarchy and the importance of each generation understanding their duty to the people they served. His words were carefully chosen to emphasize continuity, stability, and the peaceful transfer of responsibility from one generation to the next. Prince Marcus represents not just our family's future, the king said, but the hopes and dreams of our entire nation. He has been raised to understand that leadership is not a privilege to be enjoyed, but a responsibility to be embraced with humility and dedication. As these words echoed through the ballroom, Marcus felt a surge of pride mixed with the weight of expectation that seemed to settle on his young shoulders. He straightened his posture and took a deep breath, knowing that in just moments he would walk out onto that stage and officially begin his journey toward the throne. Miss Hartwell squeezed his shoulder gently. "You're ready, Your Highness. Your family is proud of you, and your people believe in you." The moment arrived with a flourish of trumpets. "Ladies and gentlemen," the king announced, "I present to you His Royal Highness, Prince Marcus Edward Alexander." Marcus walked onto the stage with measured steps, just as he had practiced hundreds of times. The ballroom erupted in polite applause, with cameras flashing like stars as he made his way to his grandfather's side. He executed his bow perfectly, and, for a moment, everything seemed to be proceeding exactly according to plan. But, in that moment of triumph, Lady Catherine made her move. She rose from her seat abruptly, pulling William with her. "Come now," she hissed to her son, "while everyone's attention is on Marcus. This is our chance." William hesitated for a split second, but his mother's grip on his hand was iron strong, and her expression left no room for argument. They began moving through the crowd, Catherine pushing past other guests with increasing desperation while William struggled to keep up. Captain Morrison spotted the movement immediately. "Subject Catherine is mobile," and, moving toward the stage area, he reported into his radio. "All units converge, but maintain distance. Do not create a scene unless absolutely necessary." The security team began moving with practiced precision, but they faced the challenge of operating in a room full of international dignitaries and media representatives. Any obvious security response could create exactly the kind of incident they were trying to prevent. Catherine's years of attending palace functions worked in her favor as she navigated through the crowd. She knew the layout of the ballroom intimately, and she used pillars and groups of guests to shield her movement toward the front where Marcus stood with his grandfather. "Excuse me, so sorry," she murmured to the guests she pushed past, maintaining a facade of polite urgency. "Family matter, just need to congratulate the young prince." Most guests assumed she was simply an emotional family member eager to share in the celebration, and they stepped aside willingly. By the time the security team realized how close she had gotten to the royal platform, Catherine and William were only 20 feet away from Marcus. The king had begun the next portion of the ceremony, formally presenting Marcus to various sections of the audience and explaining his future role in the government and military. Marcus stood straight and proud, completely unaware of the drama unfolding behind him. Princess Isabella, however, had noticed the commotion in the crowd. Her mother's instincts kicked in as she spotted Catherine's familiar auburn hair moving purposefully through the guests. Their eyes met across the ballroom, and Isabella's blood went cold as she recognized the unstable intensity in Catherine's expression. "Father," Isabella whispered urgently to the king, but the music and applause made it impossible for him to hear her without causing a scene. Catherine reached the edge of the royal platform and boosted William up before the guards could react. "Go to Marcus now," she commanded her son. "Take his hand and bring him to me. Tell him you want to show him something important about the family." William found himself face to face with Marcus for the first time in his life. The two boys looked remarkably similar, both blonde and green-eyed with the distinctive royal features that marked them as members of the same bloodline. But where Marcus radiated confidence and joy at his special day, William's face showed confusion and barely contained panic. "Hello, Marcus said with a genuine smile, extending his hand in the formal greeting he had been taught. You must be William. I'm so glad you could come today. The simple kindness in Marcus's voice made William's task even more difficult. This wasn't the spoiled, arrogant cousin his mother had described. This was just another boy, not much younger than himself, who seemed genuinely happy to meet him. My mother wants to show you something, William stammered, glancing back toward where Catherine waited with increasing impatience. She says it's important family history. Marcus looked confused but intrigued. In his sheltered life, any offer of adventure or new experience held appeal. What kind of family history? Before William could answer, Catherine's voice cut through the ceremonial atmosphere like a knife. Marcus, come here, child. There are things about your family that you need to know, things they've been hiding from you. The ballroom began to quiet as guests turned to see what was causing the disturbance. The king paused in his speech, his face darkening with anger as he realized what was happening. Captain Morrison spoke sharply into his radio. Move in now. Subject Catherine is attempting to disrupt the ceremony and approach the prince. But Catherine had anticipated this moment for years. She grabbed William's hand and reached for Marcus at the same time, her movements quick and desperate. William, bring Marcus to me now. The guards are going to try to stop us, but this is for his own good. William, torn between his mother's commands and his growing certainty that something was very wrong, made a decision that surprised everyone, including himself. Instead of bringing Marcus to his mother, he stepped protectively in front of the younger boy. Mother, stop, William said, his young voice carrying clearly in the increasingly quiet ballroom. You're scaring him. Catherine's facade of control finally cracked completely. William, you don't understand. They've stolen what belongs to our family. Marcus doesn't know the truth about who his real father is, about the documents I have that prove you should be the heir. The ballroom had gone nearly silent now, with hundreds of people watching the drama unfold. Cameras continued flashing, capturing every moment of what was quickly becoming one of the most scandalous incidents in recent royal history. Marcus looked between William and Catherine with growing alarm. I don't understand, he said in a small voice. What documents? What's she talking about? Catherine lunged forward, trying to grab Marcus's arm. Come with me, child, and I'll explain everything. Your grandfather and your mother have been lying to you about your place in this family. That was the moment Captain Morrison had been waiting for. The second Catherine made physical contact with Marcus, she crossed the line from disturbing the peace to potentially endangering a member of the royal family. Morrison and his team moved in swiftly, surrounding Catherine while being careful not to harm the children caught in the middle of the confrontation. Lady Catherine, Morrison said in a firm but controlled voice, I need you to step away from the princes immediately and come with us quietly. Catherine spun around wildly, her eyes blazing with the kind of manic energy that comes from years of suppressed rage and delusion finally breaking free. You can't silence the truth forever. I have proof that Marcus isn't the rightful heir. William is the true prince. The security team moved with practiced efficiency, gently but firmly separating Catherine from the children while trying to minimize the spectacle for the cameras and guests. But Catherine wasn't finished. Ask them about the DNA tests, she screamed as the guards escorted her toward the exit. Ask them about the real father. Ask them why they destroyed the evidence. The ballroom erupted in chaos as guests began talking excitedly among themselves. Reporters frantically scribbled notes, and the palace staff tried desperately to regain control of the situation. The carefully orchestrated ceremony had become a public relations nightmare in a matter of minutes. Marcus stood frozen in the middle of the stage, tears beginning to form in his eyes as the weight of what had just happened began to sink in. William remained beside him, both boys now united in their confusion and fear rather than divided by their mother's ancient grudges. Princess Isabella rushed to her son's side, pulling him into a protective embrace while shooting a grateful look at William for his unexpected defense of Marcus. The king, his face stern with barely controlled fury, signaled for the ceremony to be suspended. Ladies and gentlemen, he announced with forced calm, we will take a brief recess. Please enjoy the refreshments in the adjoining halls while we address this family matter. But Everyone in that ballroom knew that this was far more than a simple family disagreement. Catherine's wild accusations about DNA tests and hidden documents would be front-page news within hours, and the monarchy would face serious questions about succession, legitimacy, and what other secrets might be hidden behind the palace walls. As the guests filed out in excited whispers and the security team finished removing Catherine from the premises, Marcus and William found themselves standing together on the now empty stage, two young boys caught in the crossfire of adult conflicts they barely understood. The incident that was supposed to be Marcus's triumphant introduction to his future role had instead become the catalyst for the biggest royal scandal in decades. And somewhere in the palace medical facility where Catherine was being held for evaluation, she smiled grimly, knowing that even in defeat, she had succeeded in planting seeds of doubt that would grow into serious questions about the very foundations of the royal succession. Part 3. The aftermath of the ceremony was swift and decisive. Within 30 minutes of Catherine's outburst, the palace had been cleared of all non-essential personnel, leaving only immediate family members, senior staff, and the security team to deal with the crisis. The king convened an emergency meeting in his private office, while Marcus and William were taken to a secure area of the palace where they could be properly debriefed about what had happened. Dr. Margaret Rothwell, the palace physician and psychiatrist, arrived within the hour to evaluate Catherine's mental state and determine whether her accusations were the product of genuine evidence or delusional thinking. She found Catherine in the medical facility, alternating between periods of manic energy where she insisted her claims were true and moments of devastating clarity where she seemed to realize the magnitude of what she had just done. "Lady Catherine," Dr. Rothwell said gently, settling into the chair across from her patient, "I need you to help me understand what happened today. Can you tell me about these documents you mentioned?" Catherine's eyes lit up with the fervor of someone who believes absolutely in their cause. "They're hidden in my apartment in Geneva. I have copies of medical records, DNA test results, correspondence between Theodore and Marcus's real father. The palace covered it all up when Isabella got pregnant." Dr. Rothwell made careful notes, observing Catherine's body language and speech patterns. "When did you first become aware of these documents?" 3 years ago, Catherine replied, her voice taking on a conspiratorial tone. "I hired a private investigator to look into the circumstances around Marcus's birth. Theodore had been acting strangely around that time, and I wanted to know why. What I discovered was that Isabella had an affair with a palace guard named David Coleman, and Marcus is actually his son, not Prince Philip's." The psychiatrist continued her careful questioning, gradually building a picture of Catherine's mental state over the past several years. It became clear that her obsession with proving William's superiority over Marcus had grown into a full-blown delusional system, supported by selective interpretation of evidence and an inability to distinguish between speculation and fact. Meanwhile, in the king's office, an entirely different kind of investigation was underway. Princess Isabella sat across from her father, with Captain Morrison and the palace's chief legal counsel present to address the immediate security and legal implications of Catherine's public accusations. "Father, I need you to know that every word Catherine said was a lie," Isabella began, her voice steady despite the emotional trauma of the day. "Marcus is Philip's son, just as we've always said. I never had an affair with anyone, least of all a palace guard." The king's weathered face showed every one of his 72 years as he considered the situation. "I believe you completely, Isabella. But the damage has already been done. By tonight, Catherine's accusations will be on every news channel and website in the world. We need to decide how to respond." Captain Morrison leaned forward in his chair. "Your Majesty, I recommend we authorize a comprehensive investigation into Catherine's claims, not because we doubt their validity, but because we need to be able to definitively disprove them. If there are any holes in our response, the media will exploit them." The legal counsel nodded in agreement. "We should also consider filing charges against Lady Catherine for making false statements and disrupting a royal ceremony. It would demonstrate that there are consequences for this kind of behavior." Isabella felt a surge of protective anger. "She traumatized my son and turned what should have been the happiest day of his young life into a nightmare. I want her held accountable for that." In another part of the palace, Marcus and William sat together in what the staff called the quiet room, a comfortable space with soft furniture and calming colors where royal children could decompress after difficult events. Miss Hartwell and William's temporary guardian, a palace social worker named Mrs. Patricia Vance, supervised their interaction while trying to help both boys process what they had experienced. "I don't understand why my mother said those things," William said quietly, his earlier bravery replaced by confusion and shame. "She's been telling me for years that I should be the prince instead of you. But I never wanted to take anything away from you." Marcus looked at his older cousin with newfound respect. "You protected me when she tried to grab me. You didn't have to do that." William shrugged, seeming older than his 10 years. "She was wrong. I could see it in your face that you didn't know what she was talking about. And you looked scared. I don't like it when adults scare kids." Miss Hartwell exchanged glances with Mrs. Vance, both women recognizing the maturity and moral clarity that William was displaying despite his difficult upbringing. It was clear that Catherine's attempts to fill her son with resentment and entitlement had largely failed. "Boys," Miss Hartwell said gently, "I want you to know that what happened today wasn't your fault. Sometimes adults have problems that make them say and do things that don't make sense. Your job is just to be honest about what you experienced." Over the next several hours, a team of investigators, lawyers, and communication specialists worked frantically to address every aspect of Catherine's claims. Palace security pulled the employment records for every guard who had worked in the facility during the time period when Marcus would have been conceived. DNA samples were prepared for testing, even though the family was confident in the results. Communications teams drafted multiple response strategies depending on how the media coverage developed. Dr. Rothwell completed her evaluation of Catherine and requested a meeting with the king to present her findings. She found him in the palace library, staring out at the gardens where Marcus and William were now playing together under heavy security supervision. "Your Majesty," Dr. Rothwell began, "I've completed my initial assessment of Lady Catherine. She is suffering from a severe delusional disorder that appears to have developed gradually over the past several years following her divorce from Prince Theodore. Her accusations against Princess Isabella are not based on genuine evidence, but rather on a complex fantasy system she has constructed to explain her perceived mistreatment by the royal family." The king turned from the window, relief evident in his expression. "Are you saying she genuinely believes her accusations are true?" "Absolutely, sir. In her mind, she has uncovered a massive conspiracy designed to deny her son his rightful inheritance. The documents she claims to have are likely either forged or severely misinterpreted. I would recommend immediate psychiatric treatment and a period of observation before any legal proceedings." Outside in the gardens, Marcus and William had discovered a shared love of the elaborate hedge maze that formed the centerpiece of the palace grounds. Despite the trauma of the morning, both boys seemed remarkably resilient, finding comfort in each other's company and the simple pleasure of exploring together. "Do you think we'll be friends after all this?" Marcus asked as they sat on a stone bench in the center of the maze. William considered the question seriously. "I'd like that. I don't have many friends, and you seem really nice. But I don't know what's going to happen to my mother or where I'll have to live now." The uncertainty in William's voice touched Marcus deeply. Despite his youth, he understood instinctively that his cousin was as much a victim of Catherine's mental illness as he was. "Maybe you could stay here for a while. The palace is really big, and we have lots of guest rooms." Unknown to the boys, their conversation was being monitored by the security team, and their words were being relayed to the king and other family members. The genuine affection developing between the cousins was becoming a bright spot in an otherwise dark day. As evening approached, the palace communications team prepared for the inevitable media storm. News outlets around the world were already running stories about the disrupted ceremony, and social media was exploding with speculation about Catherine's accusations. The palace's official response would need to be carefully calibrated to address the claims without giving them more credibility than they deserved. Princess Isabella spent the evening with Marcus, answering his questions as honestly as possible while trying to reassure him about his place in the family. She found him surprisingly mature in his understanding of the situation, though she could see the day's events had shaken his confidence. "Mother," Marcus said as she tucked him into bed. "William's mother said you lied to me about who my father is. That's not true, is it?" Isabella's heart broke at the innocent confusion in her son's voice. "No, darling, it's not true. Your father is Prince Philip, just as we've always told you. William's mother is very sick in her mind, and sometimes sick minds create stories that aren't real." Marcus seemed satisfied with this explanation, but Isabella could see he would need ongoing reassurance as the story continued to unfold in the media. The innocence of his 8-year-old perspective was both a blessing and a vulnerability that would need to be carefully protected. In the guest quarters, William was having his own difficult conversation with Mrs. Vance about what would happen next. His mother was being held for psychiatric evaluation, and his father, Prince Theodore, was flying in from his current residence in Monaco to take custody of his son. "Will I get to see my mother again?" William asked, his young voice small and uncertain. Mrs. Vance chose her words carefully. "Your mother needs medical help right now, William. The doctors want to help her feel better, but it might take some time. Your father will be here tomorrow, and you'll stay with him while your mother gets the treatment she needs." The events of the day had created ripple effects that would continue for months to come. DNA tests would eventually confirm what the family already knew, that Marcus was indeed Prince Philip's biological son and the legitimate heir to the throne. Catherine's evidence would be revealed as a combination of forged documents and misinterpreted medical records created by an unscrupulous private investigator who had taken advantage of her mental illness. But the immediate crisis had also revealed something unexpected and positive. The bond forming between Marcus and William showed that the next generation of the royal family might be able to heal the wounds created by their parents' conflicts. As the two boys said goodnight to each other across the hallway that separated their rooms, both the king and Princess Isabella felt a cautious optimism that something good might emerge from the day's chaos. The palace settled into an uneasy quiet as the staff worked through the night to address the various crises created by Catherine's outburst. Security protocols were being reviewed and strengthened, media responses were being finalized, and plans were being made for William's future care and education. But in the quiet moments between the official meetings and crisis management, the royal family found themselves confronting deeper questions about how family conflicts, mental illness, and the pressures of public life could combine to create such devastating consequences. The day that was supposed to celebrate Marcus's bright future had instead forced them all to confront the darker aspects of their complicated family dynamics. The morning after the ceremony brought no relief from the crisis, only a new phase of damage control and investigation. Princess Isabella woke to find her private secretary standing outside her bedroom door with a stack of newspapers and a tablet displaying dozens of news websites, all featuring variations of the same explosive headline: "Royal Scandal. Questions raised about Prince's parentage." The images were devastating. Every major publication had managed to capture Catherine's wild-eyed expression as she made her accusations, Marcus's confused and frightened face, and the moment when palace security moved in to restrain her. The photographs told the story of a monarchy in crisis, even if the underlying facts were completely false. "How bad is it, Margaret?" Isabella asked her secretary as she reviewed the coverage. "The story has gone global, Your Highness. Every major news outlet is running some version of Catherine's claims, and social media engagement is off the charts. The palace communications team is recommending a comprehensive response strategy, but they warn it could take weeks or even months to fully restore public confidence." In his own chambers, the king was receiving a similar briefing from his communications director, Charles Whitfield, a veteran of political crisis management who in the grand halls of Eldoria Palace, where centuries of tradition dictate every breath and every step. One moment of chaos would shatter the carefully constructed world of royal protocol forever. What began as a simple family gathering would spiral into a scandal that would test the very foundations of the monarchy, expose hidden family secrets, and force a young prince to question everything he believed about his destiny. The incident happened in mere seconds, but its consequences would echo through the palace corridors for generations to come.